Like,
Right.
what would actual good writing look like? Like, what would movies that take risks actually look like in this day and age?
Hmm.
Right? We're talking about the original release of Spider-Man, right? The first comic book adaptation of a film, like in a big way. Or the original Batmans, like look at those. Like those are really bad by today's standards, but they still
I
kind
think
of
so
hold up.
too. The first Spider-Man, not so much, but Batman, yes. Like all the Tim Burton Batmans, I think were horribly written.
Hello and welcome to the Vertical Bar Podcast. I'm your co-host, Your Name Here from Orlando, Florida, and I'll be your guide as we explore the latest in innovations and tech trends and talk with industry experts.
And I'm Marcus, your other co-host, and I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. Together, we're on a mission to explore, share, and demystify the world of technology.
From our own company, Vertical Bar Media, to the wider tech universe, we're here to delve into all things digital. But enough about us. What's on the topic list today?
Thanks, Jared. So it looks like this week in tech, we have Microsoft is rolling out a new default theme and font for Microsoft 365, their productivity suite. Google has announced that it will begin issuing generative AI updates to its Chrome browser, which will allow users to get snapshots or little small summaries of news articles so they don't have to read the entire damn thing.
Hmm. And we got the potential discontinuation of Skype, Microsoft's communication app. But I mean, they have Teams, which we're using right now, so
Right?
it
Exactly.
doesn't think it'll be missed too much. And the
I
live
guess we'll
action
see.
film Barbie has surpassed The Dark Knight to become Warner Brothers' highest grossing domestically released film. And we got a couple articles here from Washington Post that's found that Twitter is adding a 5 second delay to all their websites and to websites that have criticized Elon Musk more specifically, is their claim. And the AP has also announced that it'll be using generative artificial intelligence in its newsroom. And our last topic is on the former or just the drama surrounding LTT. So we'll talk a little bit about that, how it got to where it is, and what we can hope to see for LMG in the future. And with and not without thanking our AI overlords for scripting this intro, let's dive in. What's going on with Microsoft potentially discontinuing Skype?
So we all know about Skype. Skype was purchased by it was acquired by Microsoft in 2011. We do know that it was very popular back then. It was used internationally, so you can make international calls for a cheap price. People used it for messaging, things like that. Um, Ever since Microsoft Teams came out during Corona, I believe in 2020, people have been anticipating Skype's discontinuation. So it's kind of hard to see in Microsoft's ecosystem why Skype would be necessary when Microsoft Teams has over 200 million people using it, while Skype only has over 100. Teams is obviously it's a lot newer than Skype. So for Teams to be double the amount of, to have a double the amount of a user base over Skype means that it's probably going downhill.
Yeah, I
What do
can
you
see
think?
that. I mean, it's very interesting because, Skype used to serve a very different purpose, and
Hmm.
it got conscripted into business purposes. Um,
Right.
I mean, it used to be like, dude, we'd use Skype to play WoW or something, and like be able to voice talk with our friends before Discord was really a thing.
Right.
And then once Microsoft purchased it, it became a little bit less accessible in that type of manner. And it kind of got away from its roots, where like I would love to see Skype return as a competitor to like FaceTime or something. The video call, like Messenger. Like I hate having to use Messenger every time I want to do a video call with my grandparents. But it's easy. Like,
Exactly.
yeah, I just don't know how. Like, I think it still comes down to that separation between Android and Microsoft, right? Like, or not Android and Microsoft, but Apple and Android and Microsoft, all three of them, really. I mean, Android likes to
Right.
work a little bit better with Microsoft, but Apple doesn't want to play with anybody in the yard.
You know how
They'd
they
rather just
are.
take their lunch home and eat it by themselves,
Exactly.
which
The old
sucks because like
asshole.
everybody. most of the people in my sister, my mom, and my wife all have iPhones, but they don't do iMessenger because my dad's side of the family has all Androids and I have Androids.
Yeah, for my family, everyone's been using Android for a long time, so no one has. I think I'm the only one that ventured over to the Apple side temporarily with the iPhone and iPad. But going back to Skype, I know for me, Skype is one of the few Microsoft products right now that still seems a little awkward, especially with Teams now being a thing. I know, like for me, I like to go to the Microsoft Store or the Android Play Store and download all the apps from Microsoft just to see what's been updated. And like Skype is one of the few things that I really can't find a reason for because for me, like I never made calls on Skype. I never I never purchased minutes. I never did all that stuff. Even like for like Google Voice, like I don't purchase minutes to make calls. Like I just use it for the free version and I haven't really explored it past that. And I feel like that's what most people have done. So like being that Teams is now built into Windows since 11 came out, that was one of the main reasons why 11 came out after 10 is mainly because of Teams, the Edge updates, and Microsoft 365. That's all a part of the OS. I just feel like it's built right in. I think Windows C is the shortcut for chat and it launches Teams instantly. Skype doesn't have that. So it's almost like Microsoft has been like pushing everyone towards Teams, planning to discontinue Skype. And it might be that time. There's just no
Yeah,
way for
I
people to use Skype anymore.
honestly, I think the wider audience, whenever we have an audience, but the wider community of tech people don't
Hmm.
really grasp that how old some of the technology is that we use, right?
I
Like
know
Skype is
exactly.
super dated. And like for
It
them
is.
to like update Skype to do better video calling, right? Would essentially be just like tearing it down and restarting again, which they've already
Right.
done with Teams. So it's like what responsibility does Microsoft have to continue Skype, right? And we
Right.
see
And
this with a
also,
lot of other tech. Like, let's say, there's some big program that automators use for like machine factories or something like that. That's something that
mhm,
is industry used, and this happens all the time. Like companies will switch over to a subscription model and they'll just completely ignore and like eliminate all of their lifetime customers and move over to a
right.
subscription model. It's like, well,
Exactly.
they paid for this at this time and like the software has changed so much,
So much.
and it's wild because we get complacent that, Word is going to exist forever.
I've always wondered what people thinks of Teams outside of business because, like, for me, when
Nobody
Teams was
uses it.
first introduced, well, when Teams was first introduced, I made a Facebook status update asking for like for me, I felt like Teams should be something that everybody should be using for messaging. We should be dropping Facebook Messenger or a Meta Messenger, excuse me, and because everybody has Teams built into their operating system, it's available on Android. We should all be converting over to that, and I think that's what Microsoft was trying to do by making sure it basically had a place essentially on the taskbar for. I mean, I think it one of the one of the new pinned icons for Windows 11 is chat. So it's right there on the taskbar. They have a shortcut for it. Seems like that was always their plan, but nobody uses Teams outside of Teams for Business. And I know with Skype, Microsoft never really adopted the Microsoft name for that. I guess for the name of the product, like it was never called Microsoft Skype. It was just always called Skype. And I know with Teams, they always have Microsoft and the brand behind it. So it seems like they're adding the word Microsoft to their products more. I know Office used to be Office, now it's Microsoft 365. It seems like they're using the brand and the identity of Microsoft to push their products more. And I just don't think they could do that with Skype. So it might be time to kiss it goodbye.
Yeah, I think it has to do more with the limited use of it. It's just there's not much potential left in Skype anymore, right? Like there's not much more that it can do.
So we're now on Microsoft 3. Okay, so I guess about Skype, it's pretty much going out the window. We can confirm that. It's not been announced yet, but pretty sure based on the subscriber numbers or the user base, it's going to be going soon.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, I am sorry to see it go, um, but I wish Microsoft understand why people need that kind of app. And I'm kind of weary of them pushing Teams on this kind of, because it's really strange place to be, right? Like we want our cell
Right.
phones and like we have text messages on that, we have our instant messengers, right? But me, like I just don't know what the connect disconnect is, but I don't want to have all those notifications on my computer. I don't want Twitter interrupting me like while I'm doing this video call for this work stuff. Like I
Right.
don't know, like it computers have a fundamental place in most people's mind as being fixed somewhere
Yeah.
to work at, right? Like the laptop makes that concept a little bit more mobile, but it's still like, oh, I need to pull out my laptop to work on it, right? Whereas like your phone is supposed to be some kind of communication tool, but it seems like I don't know, everything's just changing all the time because now businesses want you to use your phone as a productivity tool.
Right.
Yeah, I don't
It's
know.
like the worlds are merging. Even Google has Google Chat, right? And like that's supposed to be a Slack competitor going forward, is what they've said. But like Google
Google
Chat is
has
also built
so much
into
ground to make up in the productivity space. I'm sorry. There's a lot of companies out there using Google, and they are holding themselves back by using
well, it just
Google.
seems like a lot of companies don't know what to do with their messaging apps. It's like Facebook has
Well,
Messenger
companies
and
don't even know
WhatsApp.
what to do with that messaging app. Like,
They
honestly,
yeah,
companies from before COVID were entirely built on delegation and separation of and compartmentalization. Like the left
right.
hand didn't know what the right hand was doing. Marketing was in its own part of the building somewhere else, and nobody from engineering talked to them.
Right.
Like,
Right.
and like Teams is like really opening up businesses to have that unilateral conversation across marketing and engineering. Like, I've worked for companies that we use Slack, and it's just like, oh man, I need to um, find somebody at this facility like right now, like to do some product testing, and I can find somebody in that facility, and like I can find a manager, and they could say, oh, go to this thing. I'm no longer calling around, right? Like I'm not using a bunch of phone numbers and landlines to figure out where people are in like an office building. I can just use
Mhm.
Slack. And
Right,
like
exactly.
companies like Blizzard have especially made this so remote, and like they're able to just like pretty much conduct business from their house, from employees' houses now. Like set up a VPN into that network, and like they're good to do whatever they need to do. It's crazy.
Well, yeah, I mean, even like Facebook has WhatsApp and Messenger, and it's like, I guess it's interesting when like different demographics use the messaging app, but it's not universal. I know, like for WhatsApp, no one in the US really uses WhatsApp, but Facebook keeps trying to push it on us as if it's somehow useful when they have Messenger. WhatsApp is mostly used by international communities or people who are outside of the US. But
Yeah,
like that's
I
the
just I don't think people have seen the value in that yet, right? Like,
they haven't.
like still send text messages with pixelated photos, and like
Yeah,
even iPhone users, they can still send videos, but there's only to other iPhone users.
right.
Yeah. And so on the topic of productivity, what's with Microsoft's new font and theme for Office
Ooh.
365?
So they're finally they're getting rid of Calibri, which sucks because I love Calibri. Calibri was the font they introduced in
Really?
Windows Vista.
Oh
Dude,
man.
Calibri is what they introduced in Windows Vista. That was like the reinvented Microsoft. Microsoft moving from Windows XP to Windows Vista to me was, I don't know, it was an amazing moment. I think that's when we were in high school, so it was when I was finally starting to
Yep,
get
yep, yep.
into computers. I remember I remember restyling my Windows XP laptop to look like Vista before it came out, and like that's one of the few things that got me into technology. It was awesome. So it's like for me, Calibri is just special. It was my introduction into like sort of becoming a tech enthusiast, and like that was when Microsoft changed the Microsoft a file type for Word over from DOC to DOCX. I don't know. It was
Yeah.
just it was the new Microsoft. So now they're finally leaving that era behind, and they have a new theme. The theme is going to be called, oh, good God, give me 1 second. I'm going to re-record that. So it seems like now they have a new theme, and the new theme is going to be called Sequoia, and the new font is going to be called Aptos. So Aptos will replace Calibri. I don't know what the current theme is, but it's going to be called Sequoia now, and it's going to be more of a minimalistic design, and it should help Windows 11 pop a little bit more. Yeah, so that's what they're doing.
And so, what does this mean for their overall Microsoft transition? It seems like they've rebranded Office 365 recently to Microsoft 365. They've done some other branding previously by dropping as some of the Azure Active Directory stuff. It seems like they're just like trying to do product stack differentiation there, so people like know Azure as being web hosting and not necessarily like user profiles or something.
Yeah, so it seems like from what I've seen, Microsoft is starting to appear more user-friendly to people. To me, Windows 10 looked way more business and more sharp, more gamer-focused, but I think to increase their user base and to increase revenue, they're trying to appeal more to also to people that use Google products. Google's font is a little bit less professional, a little bit friendlier, things like that. Microsoft has always been very business looking ish. So like it just seems like with this new theme and this new font, they're going to try to bring some people over from Google, maybe from Amazon, maybe from Apple. I know Apple doesn't really have like a professional, a professional looking OS. Their stuff is also user friendly. Their icons are goofier. Their fonts aren't as crisp. So it seems like Microsoft is just trying to capture some of these people to come back over to Microsoft. I know they lost a lot of people when Windows Phone obviously was discontinued. That's sad, sad day. It seems like they're just utilizing all of their information to get some of those people back.
I wonder if
I
people
know,
actually do switch between brands like that, because from what I can understand from the numbers, it seems like numbers go up, right? Because population goes up and more people are coming into the space and more people are adopting a certain amount of tech. Not necessarily that they're dumping Apple and jumping over to Microsoft. And I'm just curious, do you see that as like as do you see that as a possibility, like people just jumping between brands?
I mean, you do have people that like leave Android for iPhones. Now, in the Android ecosystem, I don't know if people are leaving Samsung for OnePlus or leaving OnePlus for Motorola because I like testing out everything. I like all of them, so I want to use them all constantly. Obviously, my loyalties lie with Google and Microsoft more, but I guess there is this sort of like swing state mentality where people who can be they can be essentially, I don't want to say can be bought, but they're not diehard fans of either. So the next time they pick up a phone, they're okay with switching. They may not be like customization experts like me and you to where they tweak everything and they restyle it all. They could just want a phone for a phone and that's it. So I think it's possible, yes.
Interesting.
Yeah, just a little bit. But yeah, I'm excited for the new thing and the new font. I think Microsoft and their user interface and their style has been so amazing lately. Their marketing is absolutely murdering everybody else, I feel like. I just they're like they're man, they're the way they're coming up with stuff and the way that they're putting it out on the internet, it just makes me instantly want to try it. Like I can't stop investigating their stuff. So I'm excited for the redesign.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a fan of Microsoft tools. I've used them for a long time. I mean, we grew up on Office and Word, you know. I don't know if I've ever I don't remember if you do you remember that when we used to have that computer class together?
No, I didn't. You were, was it Miss Barb?
Yeah, in middle school.
You were in there with me. Oh my God. Oh
Yeah.
man.
I
I was
think I've
always a,
actually talked about this before. We convinced her that I had Tourette's syndrome.
oh my God. We
But
were
anyway,
fools.
so back in that time, we were also like, I mean, we had pretty free access to those computers. We did all our
Right.
typing tests and stuff, but for the most part, we did have kind of like unfettered access to computers. because
Right.
the school just didn't know what they were doing, honestly. I remember our high
Exactly.
school like administrative password for the entire school network was like motorcycle or something. It was all lower cases, like under 10 characters, like literally the weakest password that you can have.
Yeah. They didn't have
So
like network security or like cybersecurity people working
yeah,
for
and like
the
the
working for the
cybersecurity were
county yet.
handled by us, was handled by other students in the school. But I used to use like PowerPoint back in those days to make like little slideshow animations because you could
Hmm.
actually export them as like a .mov and like change the frame rate, and it would actually allow you to like do like basically stop motion animation with like PowerPoint, right? So like that's the kind of first little glimpse that I got of like how truly powerful some of the software was. Like people are
Yeah,
sitting there using that to make like really boring slideshows, and like
I
here I
know.
am, a 10-year-old kid, like using it to make some little stick figure skateboard, like.
Yeah,
And it's just
dude.
been it's everyone else has just been copying Microsoft.
I feel
Like
like that's how I
trying to
was
make
too.
Word better, right? I'm sorry, Google's just not doing a really good job of Word. Word is
Dude,
really good.
Docs
Like, I mean,
Docs is pretty cool,
if
but
you
yeah,
can get in really deep into Word, like start using chapters and references and like all that kind of
yeah.
stuff, it's not as powerful as like Illustrator or what's there's another one that's a publisher. So publisher is actually a standalone app for publishing stuff, like, and that's much more creative
I forgot
control
about
over
that.
like, yeah, so that's actually like developing print media, right? Like
Yeah, I
developing
need to look into that
magazines and
again.
things like this.
I
So
remember hearing about that. Yeah.
yeah, and that's what you need to like actually do layouts and like, spreads and stuff like that, multi-pages and whatnot. Word's very good for literally just doing like typeface pages, but you can also do like chapters and references, and you can have like links and dropbacks and stuff, and like it's much better. It's more mature than most of Google's offerings.
Well, it's interesting because it's like the entire Microsoft 365, I guess, like group of software applications. It's all based off Word, which is so cool. Uh, basically, the more you use all of the other software and all of the other applications in the suite, you realize that a lot of the options just come from Word. Like it's just I was using OneNote, and to me, OneNote is just like the pre version of Microsoft Whiteboard, and those all go back to Word. But like the more you use document editors, especially for Microsoft, it teaches you a lot about like a lot of things in like it just teaches you business, it teaches you design, it teaches you a lot of basics that are essential for the office. Holy shit. But it's
Oh
like
man, imagine that.
keeping up with that stuff and watching it build off each other, it's just I don't know,
Yeah.
it's really cool and I'm excited to keep that going. I do remember Publisher. I just don't know if that's still a thing or not. Do you know if Publisher is still like one of their current software applications or if that was a past
Um,
thing?
well, actually, let me explore all of Microsoft's apps here that I have available in my
I know.
Microsoft app suite. And it's
Oh, Danny,
actually
awesome.
like, holy crap, there's a lot. First of all, like
Yeah, there
admin,
is. Do they have so much stuff now? It's crazy.
dude, bookings, right? So simplify how you schedule and manage appointments inside and outside your organization. So like essentially you can set up a SharePoint site, and people can go to that SharePoint site and set up a meeting with you, and it can check that against your calendar and give them times that you set aside for that type of meeting.
That's
So
insane. Yeah, their
yeah,
stuff
so
is so
that's incredibly
specific.
useful for a business like ours. Like, let's say, hey, you want to book an appointment with one of our specialists to do something, go to the SharePoint
Hmm.
site, do that. I don't need to have like some fancy website with all that kind of stuff. Microsoft allows me to just
Exactly.
drop this onto a SharePoint site. And then you can even take your SharePoint sites and redirect them to your own whatever it's called, URL, domain name. So like a
that that other
verticalbarmedia.com,
thing.
like we could have a page on there that's verticalbar.com / bookings, and that would go to our SharePoint site that does bookings, right?
Yeah, and that's what I
Um,
like.
and so
I
that's
try
on
to
the
push
B.
people towards. Sorry,
And so that's
F
on the
you.
B. But they got the calendar. They have this compliance app which meets all your legal and regulatory technical standards for content use. So like if you have a company that has, security clearances and documentation that is classified, like you can actually
Get
manage
it,
the
dude.
compliance of that documentation on Microsoft. Um, Delve is personal insights and relevant information based on who you work with. Engage is another way to share information and organize around projects. We got Excel. Forms is actually a pretty useful tool for like submitting company-wide like polls, right? Like I want
Yeah,
to
it's like
send,
surveying and stuff like that, right?
yeah. And it's
Questions.
it's all internal stuff. And I mean it doesn't have to be necessarily internal with SharePoint. It can go out externally too. Um, there's a learning, which is actually Microsoft's learning tools are absolutely incredible. Like I've never seen the kind of documentation that Microsoft has put out by any other company. I don't think there's another company in the world that has that level of documentation for their entire ecosystem, like literally at your fingertips.
Which is insane because like a lot of this stuff people don't even realize is out there. You either have to have a business subscription to know
No,
that
you
it's even
don't.
available, or you have
No,
to
you
go
don't.
into like this. Oh, well, I know for stuff like
Go to
Publisher, I don't think that's a.
learn.microsoft.com.
Mhm.
Learn.microsoft.com. That's as simple as it is.
Yeah.
And on here, I can learn, let's see, what I can learn every programming language available, honestly. They got .NET, they
Awesome.
got Entra, they got C++, Dynamics, Dynamics
Intra.
365, PowerShell, Power BI, Power Automate. I know there's some other Visual Studio, Python integration stuff. Um, Trainings, you can even go through your certifications here. You can book your actual certifications and like have them. Um,
Education.
yeah, get learned. Get
Get learned.
learned.
Hey, doesn't Microsoft own LinkedIn?
Yes.
That's
And
what I figured
LinkedIn
because LinkedIn
LinkedIn has
LinkedIn
a
has LinkedIn
massive
Learning.
building community too. And see, that's why
Yeah,
it's so
no.
strange that people would pick Google for their document source, right? Like,
Yeah.
is it so minute that like you need your email and your documents through Google when like Microsoft offers so much more?
So they offer so much more, and it's relatively cheap to get it to. They offer a
Oh yeah.
shitload. They just
Like
introduced
the
Microsoft
power apps,
Designer.
are beyond. They're just I can't even really like explain it, but like power apps are literally just like, what if your company needed to make an app to do a certain process like really efficiently? That's it. Like I built most of what the apps that I've built is like inventory management. So like you can actually build an app. It'll have a bunch of like forms and stuff in it, but it'll submit it to a database, and the database will keep track of, how many items and all that kind of stuff. Um, it's incredible that all this stuff is like literally here for you to just kind of like play around with.
Or hey, so for the next topic, we have news on Elon Musk. He's been popular in the news cycle for the past couple of months involving Twitter and X, and it looks like there's been some issues with him and a couple of news organizations. Apparently, he has apparently Twitter had a 5-second delay whenever its user base clicked on certain news organization and the links they post. So, like if someone were to go to a New York Times article from Twitter, they would be met with a 5-second delay, and they weren't able to get to the article the way they would another article. So, this has been raising questions about whether or not Twitter is capable of handling news or not being biased towards companies that have negatively criticized Musk and the corporation.
Yeah, it raises a lot of questions. Like, honestly, who are they accountable to? They're accountable to their user base, but not really. They're accountable to the advertisers because that's the actual people that are spending money on the platform. And like, I just don't. I don't use Twitter. Like, it doesn't matter if I use Twitter or not. It doesn't matter if you use Twitter or post to it. Like,
Right.
other people are going to, and they're gonna pay the advertisers with their user data.
So I think this is kind of a funny news story. I think that Musk has been using the news cycle in the same way that Trump said he used to use it. They would basically put out all this stuff to make sure the news organizations captured their attention, or that they had the news media's attention, and they would say a lot
Yeah,
of shit just to stay in the cycle. But I don't think Trump was actually doing that. I think he was just saying that to get over all the illegal shit he did. But I do think that Musk is smart enough to be able to use the media in that same way. I think that he's actually a successful and smart businessman, and he's able to just do things to sort of poke fun at the media. And I think this is one of the things where it's just like a small fight, a small little, you know, childhood like um locker room fight, but it's not anything that he's actually ever going to use to abuse his power. I don't think anybody should be alarmed about this. I think he's just doing this just to have fun in the media. I think it's going to be. It looks like Twitter already changed. Twitter already changed the policy, or they already changed whatever the fuck was going on. So this 5 second delay is already gone. But I think he was just doing it to manipulate the media. That's all. So
I mean, that's, yeah, like, duh. Of course, like,
right,
it's, at this point, it's just so obvious and so blatant. And like, I really don't. I don't know, because it's so strange to me. Like, you brought up the comparison, the parallel between Trump, and that's what he was doing. Well, you know what?
yeah,
That's what they've been doing for a very long time. I mean, we look at Cambridge Analytica at
exactly,
the 2016 election. Before that, with Obama using the same exact company,
right,
using Meta, and the same exact scientists, data scientists, that are just doing the same exact thing. Like, duh, of course they're gonna do that
right.
because it works. And like,
It
oh
does work.
man, like,
Because
uh,
Twitter wasn't in the news for a
see,
long
I mean,
time, and now
I
all of a
like
sudden
it.
everyone's talking about Twitter.
I like, to me, this is still the strangest thing, right? Like, I'm not a conspiracy nut or anything like this, but Trump lost the election, right? Like,
Right.
we're all on that same page, and at least most of us are. But he lost the election by such a narrow margin. Like, that's not victory.
Right.
Like, as much as I,
But I don't mean
you
right,
know,
sorry. But yeah.
whatever, like, I'm not gonna get too far into the topics, but like, he still won, like, doing his thing. He still won it being Trump. We're gonna see how long it lasts. He might go to jail, but I guarantee you,
Exactly.
I
Everything's
will.
coming
I
down
am
on
a
him now,
betting man that
thankfully.
that man will never serve a day in prison.
I still think his reputation is hopefully, I mean, it was already tarnished before for me, but I don't think it was I don't think that I'm hoping now that it's finally tarnished for the people that believe that he would change the country for good when it's obvious that he's a piece of shit. I don't know. It's just we can't talk about Trump in depth right now because it'll take up the rest of the episode, and we have a couple of more topics that we want to discuss.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah. So let's see what's going on with the next topic. Oh, this is actually going to be a good one. So this is about the generative AI that Google's adding to Chrome to basically summarize news articles. You know, generative AI is always something that people think is going to be used to take away jobs, get people fired, basically steal money and steal the creative process from people who are actually creative, like in the film industry. I think that's why some of the strikes are going on, for writers, for artists who do graphic design, things like that. So I guess I'll ask you, what's your take on this first before I get my input?
I can't come up with an answer like right off the top of my head for this, because it's such a mind-bending problem, right? Because
Yeah,
it's not only that, like, hey, we're taking away jobs from artists and things like this, but it's like, well, why do they even need to have the jobs in the first place? Like, to eat and feed themselves. Like, God, aren't we like top of the food chain? Like, why do we still need to do all this stuff? Like, with money, like, what does it even mean for that anymore? Like,
I'm not following you, Jared. You'll have to explain that a little bit more. Sorry.
Yeah, it's just a little communism, right? No, but ultimately, like, I mean, companies are going to pay what they feel is worth what they're paying for, right? Like,
Right.
a movie producer is going to pay how much he thinks the writer's worth, or how much he
Right.
thinks that he can get out of the writer, right? Well, the problem is that writing has been getting progressively worse. And like, there's 1,000 videos that we can point to online of just like literally the worst writing is selling billions of dollars, right? So like,
Right.
what would actual good writing look like? Like, what would movies that take risks actually look like in this day and age?
Hmm.
Right? We're talking about the original release of Spider-Man, right? The first comic book adaptation of a film, like, in a big way. Or the original Batmans, like, look at those. Like, those were really bad by today's standards, but they still
I
kind
think
of
so
hold up.
too. The first Spider-Man, not so much, but Batman, yes. Like all the Tim Burton Batmans, I think were horribly written.
And it's just like, in a world of like all these Marvel movies, like, what, like, I know that's a kind of a bad comparison to make for, a Batman, like a DC kind of movie. Like, that's not really
No,
the point. The point is, like,
it's a good,
those movies were a risk when they started, right?
right,
Now the Marvel is the safe bet. Like, that's like,
right.
that'll always put seats in butts and seats in the theaters. And it's
Well,
just
even
it's
that
it's
now
really,
is not even making as much money as it was. But yeah, go on. Sorry.
I mean, this kind of brings it into this other topic that we have here for the live action Barbie movies, now surpassing The Dark Knight to become Warner Brothers' highest grossing domestic film. And the Barbie is pretty much existing IP, but it's just redone in something new and flashy, right? Like, where is the originality in the theaters?
We do well. Okay, so I want to point out that I have not yet seen Barbie. Have you?
No, I have not.
Have not. So we're only going to discuss the news around it, not necessarily
Yeah.
the quality of the film. I feel like we should just say that before we get
I mean,
started.
from
But
all accounts, it's been a good movie, and it's a
exactly
refreshing story. It's
right.
new, um, but there are those tropes of poor writing in it, where it's just like the assumption is that the audience is dumb and they can't understand it,
Of course. Well,
which is
that's
actually kind of the truth. Like, there are a
well,
lot of
that's why I didn't like Black Adam. To me, Black Adam should have been a very dark and non-family focused film, but instead we got a. I mean, when I wanted to see a villain that was building up to fight Shazam and Superman and things like that. I wanted him to have issues going on, or I wanted him to wreck shit up. I didn't want him to save anyone's life or rescue a family in that movie. And I feel like they had to dumb down um one of the superpowered beings that I was looking forward to seeing a story about just so that they can sell more money to families. Well, it just that movie ended up bombing like a lot of other DC films and a lot of other films have been. Even Mission Impossible is going to lose money for Dead Reckoning Part 1, and they have Part 2 releasing. So it's like movies in general lately are going through this issue where they can't capture audiences the way they used to. So there's going to have to be a change in how things are written. Um,
Well, I think it just has to do with such a disconnect between Hollywood, right? Like, and who even watches the Golden Globes or whatever? What are all the Emmys, right? Like, who even
Emmys,
watches?
yeah,
Like, who watches that, right? Like, that's
it's
literally
probably
just
just
like a
older
circle
people.
jerk for Hollywood executives.
Yeah, but I like stuff like that. I think is interesting. I do like watching them when I watch. I just never
No,
plan the
but to
night.
me,
So
to me, it perpetuates the cycle of like, oh, these people think that these are the good movies, like, but that's not what the audience is into. And like, man, reading the audience, I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, but at the same time, I do want to, I do trust experts. Like going to college, you trust the experts that have been looking into this stuff for decades and a lot of time. So I think when it comes to the film industry and art and creativity, we shouldn't leave the experts out of the process. I think if someone has been watching and dissecting films for 30 years and now they're in this group of people to where they want to get together and then judge the industry when they have the expertise of someone that has been doing this for 30 years, I don't think that someone like that should be taken out of the equation. I think that, I mean, you don't have to always trust the reviews, but I do think it's important to have that there because, I mean, based off my experience, I disagree more with audiences than I do critics. So I do think there is something that there is something there.
Well, you know, that's actually a very good point because, well,
Now,
two things on that. Like you're disagreeing with the audience, right? Like what actually
mhm,
is the audience, right? When you like let's make an example like this. You go to a restaurant,
yeah, of
right?
course.
Like you run a restaurant, 100 people come to that restaurant. They don't say anything, right? They pay their meal, they leave, but there's just one person out there that says all the food's terrible, like, and then they start standing in front of the store with a sign. They're just yelling, "The food's terrible, the food's terrible, the food's terrible." Like you would get the impression that the food is terrible at that restaurant, right?
Right.
But that's not necessarily the case. And like I feel like that's the kind of the problem with social media and the internet in general is that the people that are the loudest and that have the most populist sounding opinions aren't necessarily the
Mhm.
ones that do. That's not
Right.
necessarily what
Not
represents the
always, right.
community at the large. I mean, not even generally, honestly. Like it just seems so off skewed. Like you go to any website and it's just a completely different view. Like you go to Reddit and you're gonna get one type of viewpoint. You go to Twitter, you're gonna get another type. You go to YouTube and you're just gonna get into like some weird conversations on YouTube because like who
Right.
goes to the comment section on YouTube?
I do. I go all the time. That's how you get the other side of the story. I love reading comments and discussions on this stuff. Like whenever I read news
Oh
articles,
yeah,
I
no, I read.
always check
That's a
the
but see,
comments
that's the
all
thing.
the
Like
time.
I'm a lurker, right? Like I'll read the
Yeah,
comments all day long. But like
yeah.
who the hell is writing all these comments? Like
I know. Well, now, okay, so now
who
I've become
uses
a
social
comment
media?
writer. I guess for me, I disagree with the audience more because I just don't necessarily think that most people have I don't necessarily think that most people are smart enough to be able to dissect a $200 million project all the time. Like, I
Oh
just
yeah.
don't think that people are able to understand what some of the symbolism means. Like, do people pay attention to the outfits? Do people read the story behind the actors, behind the directors? Do people actually get into what's happening behind the scene? Do you know the techniques that the director is using? Like, do you know what if like it's like you do you know if this is an original soundtrack or if these are pre-selected songs that have been already done by other artists? Like, I feel like people don't look into that stuff. So for me, I don't really trust an audience to be able to give me the actual opinion that I would feel because I mean they're not looking at the entire story. They're just looking at if whether or not the action scene was good, and then they ignored the other hour and a half. Like is it so I just don't feel like I don't know, like that's just less likely to happen for me. So um I do think that this is a win for Warner Bros. Obviously because it's profitable, but there's just another thing going on in the film industry where, I mean, Barbie is the biggest story because it's one of the only successful films to come out all year.
Well,
So
no, I
like,
mean it's actually Barbenheimer, which is the real like the duo. The fact that two of them came out in a very short time frame of each other, and both of them were like strangely unique, right? Like Oppenheimer
which
is
is
about
good,
the father of the atomic bomb. Like
right?
who's gonna make a blockbuster about that? Like, oh yeah.
Exactly. Obviously, Christopher Nolan,
Yeah,
and
the
I
guy
know that
that
Christopher
the
Nolan
guy
is no
that
longer
didn't
with
make the
Warner
movie that's
Bros. So this
surpassing
was
his other
supposed.
movie that he made.
Yeah, it's funny because like Christopher Nolan used to be with Warner Bros. And he's not anymore ever since they did that thing during COVID where they were releasing all of their films on HBO Max on the exact same day as theaters, and he literally left that studio because of that decision. So this would have been two successful films for Warner Bros., but because of that issue with Nolan, then they only have the one. But man, they have Blue Beetle that's coming out I think this week, and that's on track to lose money as well. So to me, for Barbie, like the big story isn't in the movie itself; it's what's surrounding it and how money is being like. I don't know what's making people go to a movie like that over some of the other films that have come out this year. And thank God Oppenheimer was also successful, but it's just there's a story there, and I'm just not sure what it is yet.
Yeah, I
I
just
guess I
don't
should.
know what I just don't know what the industry is anymore because like it's streaming, oh it's
Marvel
not streaming,
changed
oh
it.
it's going to movie theaters. Like yeah, I'd love to go see movies in theaters, but like most people just don't have the time to be able to do that kind of stuff often.
Yeah.
Like you go to a couple movies a year now. Like
Well,
it's not like a
streaming prices
weekend
are
thing
going to
anymore.
go up. They're going to skyrocket because the film industry and the TV, the cinematic industry or whatever the fuck you call it, they're going to get their money. If they're spending billions of dollars a year on projects, the money will come from somewhere. If people want to give up on theaters, that's cool. But I mean, I think we're going to be paying like 30, 40, $50 for one subscription online soon. And I mean, what Disney Plus went up from 6.99, and I think now it's at I forgot the numbers, but it's pretty much doubled in 3 years. So
Yeah.
I think that, this is if people want to stay at home, that's fine, but they better be ready to pay for it. This whole paying $8 or $12 or $15 a month to watch whatever movie you want it's about to be done because if a place like Disney or a company like Disney is losing all this money, they're gonna get the money from streaming. So we might end up missing the theater because if we don't go to the theater enough, then we're gonna end up paying for other people's subscriptions.
Yeah, and the question is the content come out of that has come out of streaming services been better than the content that's come out of the Hollywood?
I don't necessarily think so. I think the movies for streaming are significantly dumber and just they're not the only movie I've seen that's come out on a streaming platform that has been worth it was The Gray Man. And that was on Netflix, but that was done by the Russo brothers who did the Avengers Endgame, Infinity War, and Captain America the Winter Soldier and Civil War. So like there's just not there's the experience of going to the theater and the experience of promoting it and having all of the news surrounding it. It kind of goes away with streaming because it's so saturated. You have movies and TV shows coming out. When you have a TV show and a movie releasing on the same platform, they eat at each other's momentum and promotion. So I don't think companies have found a way to capture people's attention online for both TV and film. Streaming is basically going to be left for TV shows, and film should remain in the theaters for the most part. But if you try to merge those together, it's going to be they're going to just charge asshole prices to make this a thing. Because if people get dependent on streaming, guess what? People are going to pay for it. So they know they can get the money out of you or them. So, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean this the subscriptions are a moneymaker for these companies. I don't know. I really don't know.
It's like it's
There's lot.
guaranteed monthly revenue. Yeah. And
Yeah,
they put all of their I mean, look at Netflix. Netflix is like $20 now for its like most not the basic plan, but for the one that's most used, the one that gets you like over 720p, and I think you can share it between like four people or whatever. That one's like $20. And that's for I mean, I just if we're paying $20 for all of these subscriptions soon, that's $100 a month. But not even that, it's going to go higher than that. I mean, I just hope people are ready because it's I don't know. There's something's coming soon, and
yeah.
I don't know. Streaming is definitely interesting because it was supposed to be a huge thing, and now it's not nearly as profitable as what people thought. I mean, you had entire companies, and it's just people have been putting a lot of money into these projects. And I mean, you have HBO Max that was supposed to be revolutionized by streaming. HBO seems to have been doing a lot better before they changed into Max, before they did all this merging, and before they tried to become a streaming giant. When they were just HBO Now and HBO Go, and they were doing the subscription pricing, I mean, we saw them doing Game of Thrones and Westworld at the same time. They were doing like three big budget shows and Watchmen. They did all those big budget shows, and now all of their funding's gone since they tried to become HBO Max. So it's just, I don't know. It's like it's about to become more expensive, but it's also not as profitable as it should be. So I don't know how they're going to get people back in the theater. That's my point, and I don't know if that's a good thing for the economy or not.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how how streaming is going to be profitable anytime soon. Like with the way that the American infrastructure is, and honestly, infrastructure over a lot of the rest of the world, it's just video on demand platforms just
Enron.
take up so much data on the networks. Like it's just
Yeah.
it's wild, and like the appetite for consumption is even more wild. Well, Marcus, that's all we have time for today here on the Vertical Bar podcast. As always, it's been a blast exploring technology with all of you.
Indeed, it has, Jared. And remember, folks, if you want to learn more about topics we discussed, check out the description with links to our social media platform channels or slash pages. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast for more tech adventures.
Absolutely, Marcus. And we'd love to hear from you. Reach out with your questions, ideas, or just say hi. We're on all social medias as Vertical Bar Media.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and remember, the only constant in technology is change.
Nailed it.
I got it.